Oh, oh my God. Okay. Do you see my text?
Yes, I see.
Okay. Do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So, dear participants, it's my great pleasure and a great honor to read my paper, my presentation in the regional meeting of International Plato Society. My name is Iouseok Kim, and I'm working as a researcher in Seoul National University. And I studied Plato, and recently I translated the Timaeus of Plato into Korean. So the presentation I prepared for today is on the Timaeus, especially the role of the liver in Plato's Timaeus. In the Timaeus, the liver is not treated at the level of biology nor medicine, but Timaeus is treated at the level of psychology. It is well known that Plato distinguishes a human soul in two kinds, immortal soul and mortal soul. The former, immortal part, is the former, which is the rational part of the soul, the reason, or in Greek nous, is made by the demiurge itself, while the latter, the mortal one, to which belong to the spiritual part, anger, thymos, and the appetitive part, desire, epithymia, is made by the assistant gods, the sons of a demiurge, and that is the stars. And the gods locate the region in the head of a man, the anger, thymos, the chest, and the desire, the belly. The place of a region is far from the place of desire, so that the region can be free from the disturbance of desire. But as the leading part of the human soul, reason needs to govern effectively the appetitive part, which is the most irrational and disobedient. That is the reason why God made the liver as the mean of controlling and dominating desire. At the same time, God made the liver as the center of divination. The structure of the liver is described like that of a mirror, which can reflect not only the order of the region, but also the messages from the gods. It means that the signal of a language, logos, sent from region and the gods, are transformed to that of images, in Greek, eidolon and phantasma. In fact, this is not surprising because the liver is made up for the domination of the irrational parts of the soul, so there is no room for logos. That is why the rational parts of the soul and the gods who are much more rational than human beings, need to send their messages under the form of images. So in my presentation, I'd like to concentrate on some way of a communication between reason and the desire by analyzing the structure of the liver and its role described in the Timaeus. Excuse me. Okay. Yes. In fact, this the subject, the theme on the liver is not very studied in the Plato Society, but we can cite two great works: the work of Luc Brisson, the bon usage des règlements Grèce, and the work paper of Anne Shepard, The Mirror of Imagination. The work of Brisson is focused on the nature of folly and its relation to the divination, while the study of Anne Shepard is focused on the use of mirror images in the Platonist tradition in ancient psychology. So sometimes I recite these articles and I will give my interpretation. So first, we can read the text. It's the Timaeus 71a to D. The translation is the translation of Donald G. They, the gods, knew that this part of the soul was not going to understand the deliverance of reason, and that even if it were in one way or another to have some awareness of them, it would not have an innate regard for any of them, but would be much more enticed by images and the phantoms night and day. Hence, the god conspired with this very tendency by constructing a liver, a structure which is situated in the dwelling place of this part of the soul. He made it into some dense, smooth, bright, and sweet, so also having bitter quality, so that the force of the thought sent down from the mind might be stamped upon it as upon a mirror that receives the stamps and returns visible images. So the force of the mind's thought could frighten this part of the soul whenever it could avail itself of a congenial portion of the liver's bitterness and threatens it with severe command. And by infusing the bitterness all over the liver, it could project a bilious color onto it and shrink the whole liver, making it wrinkled and rough. It could curve and shrivel up the liver's lobe and block up and close off its receptacles and portal fissures, thereby causing pains and bouts of nausea. And again, whenever thought's gentle inspiration should paint quite opposite pictures, its force would bring respite from the bitterness by refusing to stir up or to make contact with a nature opposite to its own. It would instead use the liver's own natural sweetness on it and restore the whole extent of it to be straight and smooth and free, and make that portion of the soul that inhabits the region around the liver gracious and well-behaved, conducting itself with moderation during the night when, seeing it has no share in reasoning and understanding, it practices divination by dream. End quotes. Okay, the above passage shows that Plato maintains the teleological perspective on the liver. Liver did not come into existence by chance, but it is designed by God as the device of a vision for dominating the desire. The desire has no capacity to understand the logos. It can only react against the images. In the text, we can find eidola and phantasmata. Thus, to have a contact with the desire, the reason needs to adopt other means of communication than logos. The passage that God conspired with this very tendency, yes, tuto to epibuleusas, by constructing a liver, he situated it in the dwelling places, eisten katoikesin, of this part of the soul, means that the liver is designed by God as the device for the communication between vision and desire. Then how does the liver work? In other words, how does the vision dominate the desire through the liver? According to Plato's explanation, it is through vision and the taste. The god makes the surface of a liver dense, quickenon, smooth, leion, and bright, lampron, and give it sweet and bitter quality, gluqui and picroteta. Firstly, the vision and the touch. We can find that there are three senses. Dense and smooth belong to the sense of touch, bright belong to the sense of vision, and sweet and bitter belong to the taste. Sorry. We can also think that the first three senses, dense, smooth, and bright, reminds us of the mirror. Dense and smooth is related to the structure of the surface of the mirror, and bright reminds us of its function. That is to say, mirror reflecting the light and the images. Like the surface of a mirror, the surface of a liver also reflects various images sent from the rational parts of the soul. It is by those images that reason exercises its power, either by frightening or by seducing the appetitive parts of the soul. Secondly, taste. As for the sense of taste, Plato has considered in the Timaeus 65c and 66e that the taste is the impressions that tongue receives. Bitterness the bitter taste is harsh and the painful impressions of a tongue. Sweetness is the impressions recovering from harsh and destroyed taste. Like this, I cited the table. This table is from Sohn. So the way that the region control desire through vision and the taste is twofold. You can see the 2-1 and the 2-2. So on the one hand, the force of the region in the text, Plato describes it, dynamis, of the region produces the terrible images on the surface of the liver and spreads bitterness in every part of the liver. It is through these visual images and the taste that the desire suffers fear and pain, so that it obeys the region. Now, on the other hand, 2-2, an inspiration from the region produces a gentle and a mild images, and it spreads sweetness in the organ. In that case, the desire feels the sense of a pleasure and voluntarily submits to the region. So, in short, the region uses the liver like a carrot and a stick to dominate the desire. Then, what changes can we find on the surface of the liver? The state of the liver is also very, very interesting aspect in the Timaeus. The changes that the liver suffers by the intervention of the regions are three. Firstly, the change of a proportion of bitterness and sweetness. Secondly, the change of the surface of the liver, the color of the liver and the softness of the surface. And thirdly, the change of the constituent, the elements of the liver. In text, the love, gal, porters, all are the elements of the liver. Lastly, the feeling of fear and the comfort depends on the state of each surface. And the power of a region threatens desire. The surface of the liver becomes rough and wrinkled by contraction, and it has a bilious color. And those changes arouse the feeling of fear. On the contrary, a mild inspiration sent from the region softens the surface of the liver and causes the feeling of comfort. Secondly, the changes of taste and the changes of the elements of the liver can also cause the pain and pleasure. On the one hand, when the region spreads the bitterness and when it causes the twist the lobe to obstruct the vessels and the hepatic portals, then those states of the liver produces pain and nausea. On the other hand, when the liver recovers the proportion of taste and the normal state of organs, those states produces the sense of comfort and pleasure. The description on the structure of the liver and its function shows that the rational part of the soul communicates with the desire not by logos, but by using non-verbal means, the visual images and the taste. The Plato is not satisfied with the above determination. He considers the liver not only as the device of domination, but also as the center of divination. In other words, liver is a kind of a device by which God sends their messages to the human beings. So I'd like to read the text I quote. For our creators recalled their father's instruction to make the mortal race as excellent as possible, and so redeeming even the base part of ourselves in this way, they set the center of divination here so that it might have something grasp of the truth. The claim that God gave divination as a gift to human folly has good support. While he is in his right mind, no one engages. In divination, however, divinely inspired and true it may be, but only when his power of understanding is bound in sleep or by sickness, or when some sort of a possession work a change in him. End of quotation. According to Plato, the installation of the center of divination in the liver is related to the intention of the demiurge. Demiurge wishes to make a human being as excellent as possible, so he wanted to, sometimes he wanted to the direct intervention of the gods to the human. But why did God make it in the liver? We have seen that God made the liver as the device of domination by which reason can make the desire obey him. But in this passage, the liver is no longer the device of domination. On the contrary, the liver is the place where one can contact with the truth of God under the form of divination. The fact that gods send messages to man does not mean that reason rules over desire. Rather, it means the direct intervention of the gods in order to make human beings better. In this sense, the role of the liver goes beyond the domination of desire, because the liver becomes the place of communication between man and the gods. Then, in what process do the messages of the gods reach the liver? It is noteworthy that man's vision, the rational part of the soul, stops temporarily in order to receive messages from the gods. I think it is very remarkable. So that is to say, the rational parts of the soul, the reason, human reason, cannot receive directly the messages of the gods. So when the messages of the gods come into human, the reason must stop temporarily. In other words, man is in a state of folly. It is aphrosine, senselessness, while the words of God enter into the human soul. Plato mentions three cases: the sleep, hypnos, and sickness, nosos, and the divine possession, enthusiasmos. So firstly, sleep is related to the divination through dream. Indeed, it is not unusual to see in the Homeric epics that the gods intervene to heroes through dreams. The Iliad, Book 2, for example. Gods send their messages to men when they sleep, because the vision does not work during sleeping. And secondly, sickness also causes the weakness of vision. And during that time, the god can insert their messages into the human soul. And according to the explanation of Phaedrus, a folly comes into existence to a man who suffered a great disease. And it is through this folly that man has a chance to hear the voice of God and to become a prophet. And thirdly, divine possession. Divine possession is also related to the religious ceremony and especially initiation. This, for example, the story of Pythia, the priestess at Delphi, is a well-known example of a divine possession. While she does religious ceremony, she loses consciousness by being possessed by the god of Delphi, and at that moment, Apollo sent the oracle to her. So sleep, sickness, and the divine possession cause a temporary cessation of the activity of human reason. The message of the gods, which are more rational than human reason, are paradoxically transmitted to man only when human reason stops. And the forms of transmission are images such as dreams and illusions. That is the reason why the liver that has a structure like a mirror is selected as the receptacle of divination, the center of divination. But there is a difference between the region who send the images to dominate the epithumia, and the gods send the images to give the messages to human. The dreams and the illusions that the god send to the liver contrast well with the images that the vision sent to the liver. They are reflected on the surface of the liver as images. In this point, they are in common, but there is a difference between them. The essential difference is the final recipient of the images. Firstly, the recipient of the images, the regions and is the appetitive part of the soul, the desire. The purpose of this act is nothing other than to dominate the desire. In contrast, on the contrary, the recipient of the images that God sends is the rational part of the human soul. The demiurge wants you to make a mortal race as excellent as possible, but since the human being is only an imperfect and a mediocre being, the gods made the center of the divination in the liver to transmit their advice directly and warning through it. But it is not appetitive part of the soul, that it is not the desire that judges the message of the gods. It is rather the rational part of the soul, the reason, who can judge the divine messages and decide to obey them. In this sense, the goal of the divination is no other than the persuasion of human reason. But the problem is that the persuasion is not easy because the human reason cannot understand directly the images from the gods. That is why, for example, the oracle appears to man always obscure and ambivalent. It is also for this reason why we need prophets. The prophets can interpret the messages and make clear the meaning of the oracle. So for Plato, the prophet is no other than the interpreter of gods, because he interprets the meaning of the images and the gods that God sent to the liver. So I think we can compare the twofold role of the liver. The first is a liver is made as the instrument for the domination of the desire by reason. The secondly, the liver is made for the center of the divination sent from the gods. Okay.
Iouseok Kim?
Yes, I stop here. I stop here. Thank you for your attention.
Finished? Okay. Satoshi Ogihara.
Again, this is an upload, not raising hand. Sorry for confusing.
Thank you.
If you have any question, you can open the microphone and say your name or write your name in the chatting box, please.
May I question?
Yes.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Professor Cho.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your interesting presentation. Your presentation reminded me of the previous presentation, the presentation of
Philebus.
Philebus, yeah. My question is simple. Is it possible for the reason to give a false imagination and redirect the epithemia from one desire to another?
Sorry,
Okay.
My question is,
yes.
My question is not directly related to your presentation, but from your presentation, I had a question. The question is it possible for the reason to give a false imagination and to redirect from one idea, to redirect the epithemia from one desire to another?
Yes.
So my question is related. My question is not only related to your presentation, but also to the presentation of
Professor Sohn.
Yeah, Dr. Sohn. So both of you can answer to my question. It is possible for the reason to give false imagination to the epithematicon.
The false
imagination. I think it is a important contact point between the Republic and the Timaeus. In the Republic, it is allowed the rulers to terrorize terrori,
Yes.
to dominate the epithemia of the masses, it should be possible for the rulers to dominate the epithematicon of the masses, but according to the Timaeus, it is only possible for the reason to dominate the epithematicon through images. So
Yes. Yeah.
in order that the domination of reason over the epithematicon is possible, then the reason should use somewhat imaginations.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for your question. I think that it is possible. So so the power of a region is not only transmit the episteme to others, but also change it or transform the episteme to the images or other forms, not as the episteme, but because as in the text concerning the liver, we can find two kinds of domination over the region to the appetitive part, the desire. The first is by way of Timaeus. That is to say, the region, by the help of the Timaeus, the anger, by the force of the Timaeus, region can dominate epithemia. It is said in the Republic, but it is not sufficient. In the Timaeus, Plato said about the direct domination. That is to say, region dominates directly the epithemia, the desire. Now, how is it possible? It's by the liver. That is to say, region send not the logos, but the images. Because epithemia cannot read, cannot understand the logos. So region send directly the images, and the images can be reflected on the surface of the liver, just like the light is reflected on the surface of the mirror. The wall of the liver is just like a mirror. That is to say, region can change or transform his ideas as logos to the form of the images. So in the Republic, we can say differently in the Republic. The Republic is a political philosophy, it's not just physiology nor the cosmology, but the ruler, the philosopher kings can dominate his citizens not only by philosophical discourse, the persuasion of philosophical discourse, but also by the mythology, or use other means of persuasion. And the mythology is normally used by the poets. Mythology is a kind of images, a series of images. So at the level of political philosophy, philosopher kings' knowledge can be transmitted not only as the form of knowledge, but also is changed as the mythology or others. I'm not sure I can explain exactly what you want.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. And I think Dr. Sun Yu Chang has something to talk to.
Yeah, I just well, since it's a question for both of us, so I think I can. Well, as I understand in Plato's dialogues, from the active, like purely active part and the passive part, there's always an intermediate. So we always find the philosophers, kings does not rule directly the producers, the producers class, but through the guardians. So in the epithemia and reason in between, there's always the tumors. as the transition between the both of them. So I think the intermediate part is rather important. As in my presentation, the intermediate part will be where memory comes in. That we have a judgment, but the reasoning itself cannot last. It's not something durable in times. So in order to keep this form, we need to store the association established in the reasoning alongside with sensation in the memory in order to mobilize imagination afterward. So for me, what I can notice is that between the active and the passive, there is always an intermediate that does the transition of the two. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. And we have another question from Andrei Kraza.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a very interesting talk. I never thought in details about this part of the Timaeus speech, so thank you very much. And my question is, can you please expand on the way how the gods use the liver to somehow help reason to think more properly? Because it seems to me from this passage that the way the gods do it can't be direct. There has to be some intermediate, some intermediate phases of this process, because it seems to be if the gods somehow influence the liver, then it is not the reason who reads these states of the liver, isn't it? That there has to be something else which reads it, and then the reason reacts afterwards. But maybe I'm wrong. So just can you please expand on how the gods influence the reason by modifying the liver? Thank you.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. Yes, it's a very good question. Yes, I think in the Timaeus we can think that the gods cannot meet directly the human being. It is not possible because the human being cannot receive or understand the God's speech directly. So the gods use the liver. The liver is an intermediate organ. That is to say, that send their messages not as the logos, but as the illusion or in dreams or etc. So it is reflected on the liver. So when we in sleep and dreams, or we are in the state of enthusiasmus, at the time our vision does not work. We have out of mind. We are in out of mind. And at that moment, that insert their speech under the form of the illusion or under the form of dreams, some kind of images. And after that, when we have our mind can come back, we can memorize what we have seen in the state of a dream. But the problem is that because it is the form of images, that those images are always obscure and ambivalent. This is typically the contents of the oracles. The contents of the oracle is always ambivalent, they're always obscure. So it is possible to misunderstand. So it is the reason why we need always the prophet. So that is the reason also why Plato says in the Timaeus and in other dialogues also, Plato accentuates always that we need the prophet, but the prophets is no other than the interpreters of the messages of God. That is to say, interpretation of the messages is the role of the reason. So for Plato, the divination is not just doing of a fortune teller. It's just the work of the interpreter who studies and who make clear the messages from God. So that by this way, the God indirectly contact with the human being.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Kim, can you explain something more in detail the relationship between the liver as the means of domination and liver as the center of divination? I ask the relationship between domination and divination. Is there something direct connection or independent function of liver?
Function of the liver.
Yes.
Domination and divination.
Yeah, domination and
Yes.
divination.
Yes.
Okay, we can say well, so liver has two functions. One is domination part, and another part is divination part.
Yes, just one thing. I'd like to, to comment. So, thank you.
Yeah.
So, I think that the liver is the device of divination is not just the Plato's thinking.
Mhm.
In fact, it is spread in the Greek cultures.
Yeah.
Especially in the Attic period. So, for example, we can find the example in the tragedy of Euripides. Electra, in that Aegisthus read the organs of the dead animal, and that
divination.
Yes,
divination.
the liver was not in good state, so the Aegisthus, I think that it will be a bad thing. So that is to say, the divination by seeing the liver of the animal is not unusual at the period. So I think perhaps Plato knew those culture, and he wanted to explain the philosophical explanation, to give the philosophical explanation to those culture.